Let's begin.
Oh, hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Just when you thought it was safe to jump back into bed, you're proven dead wrong. If you've ever wanted to follow your dreams, be mindful where they lead you. Get ready to embark on the second series of this epic saga with Doughboy420's Return to Dreamscape, Part 1. The madness continues.
I've been here for several years now, in a room with white, padded walls, the flat, cold bed that sat in the corner, and the little end table that sat beside it, corners shaved to a curve, and bolts locking its legs to the floor, all preventing me from using it as a weapon or something in case of some kind of crazy outburst. I believed for many years that I had released the tentacled beast upon the earth. I feared that I'd freed a horrible, eldritch prisoner to destroy not just the world as we know it, but the very fabric of existence, the essence of being. I felt his presence everywhere, in the shadows of the courtyard, within dark doorways and dimly lit halls. Everywhere that I went, I could feel this uneasiness, which warned me that he could be just around the corner. It was like a psychic stench that only I could smell. I knew he was there, watching, waiting. He was free, but he still haunted me. It was as if he was everywhere, yet nowhere at all. Despite my ever-growing paranoia, the doctors believed that I was making progress. But I'm still haunted by the feeling of dread at every passing moment. I fear that the world will fall out from under me at any minute, and that I will descend into a world of nightmares filled with terrifying, hidden things beyond the realm of human cognition. A world beyond, yet inside of our own. I knew it was there, but at least I could not see it. I knew that the entire world could not see it either. So, as long as it didn't hurt them, I figured it wouldn't hurt me either. Then, I thought about the strange deaths and disappearances over the years. People from all around the world just vanishing or up and dying without any explanation. What if this other world really did have some kind of effect upon our own? I'm sorry, I'm rambling again, aren't I? Is there anything else that you'd like to know? The man said, looking toward me. He had been here for many years, after he had murdered his uncle in an old building that they were fixing up. He claimed that he had released a demon, and that it was the demon that had killed his uncle. He completely believed this delusion. However, they never found a book. Demons aren't real, and they found him covered in his uncle's blood, so it was pretty concrete what had happened. Thank you for telling me about yourself, sir, I said. You said that a demon killed your uncle? What was this demon's name? I asked him. I don't think he has one, he began. I think this thing's been around forever, just sealed away inside this other reality that's inside of our own. It's probably existed since the earliest forms of multicellular life sprouted from the ocean and began to feed the beings that co-evolved beyond the thin veil of existence. He finished. Thank you, I told him, before we were startled by a knock from outside the door. I knew that this meant that visiting hours were over and that I had to be on my way. I thanked the poor man and was on my way. The guards standing there gave me weird looks, as if I were doing something wrong. I was just a reporter doing a special piece for the upcoming anniversary of the brutal murder in a nearby house. I had just interviewed the culprit, whom was guilty of that murder. I grabbed the belongings that I had checked at the door and left the premises. During the entire drive back to the city, I thought about the man that was known to the public only as the cultist. The fantastical stories that filled the newspapers were only a sliver of the claims that the man had. The headlines were just the tip of the insanity iceberg on this one. You can only say so much in a newspaper, and many of them focused on the crime, or speculated on the motives behind his insanity. None of them really listened to his madness. He rambled of things that existed within a dimension inside of and next to our own. He spat out one thought after another, explaining to me how there were infinite universes on top of, beneath, beside, and inside of each other, all existing at once, and being manifested into existence at once. All of them were connected, all of them very similar, yet different. They ranged from minor variations, like differences in what I had for breakfast this morning, to complete chaos where the world had been thrown into nuclear war or some kind of viral outbreak had taken place. He said that they were all connected through the endless consciousness and unconsciousness of all things that have ever been and always will be. They multiplied every fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second forever into infinity, and all of them were born within the Dreamscape. The Dreamscape, a place that exists outside of space, in a time outside of time, where dreams are born and nightmares thrive. It stretches forever into the void, in every direction where everything is, yet nothing can be. The Dreamscape, a world existing inside of and next to every other world, like the shaded glue binding the multiverse together. The man was obviously delusional, ranting about alternate dimensions and infernal, immortal beings that existed since time immemorial. I needed a break from the crazy before I was sucked down into the rabbit hole, just like that insane, delusional guy. So, I stopped in at my favorite little hole-in-the-wall restaurant just off Main Street, where I sat down in my usual booth in front of the window and ordered my usual meal. A meal consisted of a medium-rare burger, extra pickles, along with the place's signature spicy curly fries. The place may have been a quaint, often overlooked little restaurant, but it was actually fairly well known around the area for its mouth-watering, spicy curly fries. As I sat there, waiting for my meal, just as I normally do, something very, very unusual took place. I happened to peer out of the window across the street towards a small park that sat just on the other side of the busy road. The park was filled with young children, all happily playing on the playground equipment. But there was something unusual. There was a man standing on the sidewalk between the park and the road. The man stood there, completely motionless, just staring at me. He wasn't looking at the restaurant, the road, or anything. He was staring directly at me. He was of average height and build, aside from a bit of a beer gut. He appeared to be a vagrant, covered in tattered and torn clothing that was in turn covered with grit and grime. I couldn't tell much what he looked like from where I was seated, only that he had a scraggly, dirty beard and dirty skin to match. He kind of gave me the creeps, and I tried to turn away and ignore him while waiting as patiently as possible for my food. But to be totally honest, I wanted to get my food, eat it, and get the hell out of there as fast as possible. It wasn't long before my food came, delivered by the same cute redhead that had taken my order. I scarfed it down as quickly as I could. It was delicious as usual, but I didn't want to sit around and savor it. Hell, I even neglected to put any ketchup or mustard on my burger, because I just wanted to get the hell out of there. I was about halfway through my burger when I happened to once again glance out the window. He was gone. The man was nowhere to be found, and I sighed in relief, figuring that he'd moved on to better things. I turned to continue eating my food, but when I was about to take another bite, I was startled by the sound of a loud thud against the glass of the window, followed by several bangs against the portal. The man was now pressed against the glass, pounding on it with his fists, his face pushed up against the glass like he was trying to force his head through. His mouth gaped open, and I could hear his frantic screams, which left clouds of fog upon the window. The man's eyes were filled with madness and anger. He acted as though he wanted to kill me. He clawed and bit at the glass, his skin covered in cuts and boils, his beard filled with what looked like decades of rotten bits of food and muck, its hairs all sticking together in patches, making him even further unsightly. I jumped out of my seat and onto the floor, crawling backwards away from the window where I was sure the man would smash through. I suddenly turned to look at the other patrons of the restaurant. Everyone was staring at me like I was out of my mind. I then pointed to the window to defend my actions, to show them the crazed man that was outside the thin glass window pane. But he was gone. Completely gone. There wasn't even a trace of where he had been. No clouds upon the window, no smears of grime across the glass, and no scratches. The window pane was completely pristine. But There was a man pounding on the window, I said in a panic, trying to explain myself, but everyone just looked at me, confused and disturbed. I knew that they had not seen him. I quickly got up from the ground and retrieved my wallet before tossing a 10 onto the table, more than enough to pay for my meal and a tip. I'm sorry, I managed to stutter as I tossed the money onto the table and quickly rushed out the door. As I made my way home, 1,000 thoughts began to flood through my mind. Was that guy on drugs? What did he want? Was he even there? Did anyone else see him? Am I losing my mind? Maybe I need to take a break from this crazy research, I thought. I think it might be affecting my brain. I tried my best to rationalize what had happened and push it out of my mind, but try as I might, I couldn't get that memory out of my head. Even worse, I couldn't make any believable sense of it. Eventually, I'd made it back to my little one-bedroom apartment. Well, one-room apartment, rather. Room 103. The place that I lived was a dump, and it was kind of more of a dorm than an apartment complex. We didn't even have our own bathrooms. Everyone there had to use the same bathrooms and showers. It was safe, though. Everything was separated with walls, and every stall had a lock, and we had security guards 24/7. But it still wasn't a very homey environment. It was a place to rest my head, after all. The tenants were nice, and the rent was cheap, so I wasn't going to complain. My room was small and cold, but my bed was nice and warm, and it surprisingly wasn't too long before my wandering mind allowed me to drift off to sleep. I was awoken in the middle of the night to the sound of my bedside phone ringing. I slowly stirred and rolled over to look at my phone, and my digital clock sitting beside it. Who the hell's calling me at 3:30 in the morning? I grumbled, seeing that the time read just after 3:30. I continued to grumble as I reached over and grabbed the phone from my bedside. Hello? I said sleepily, after placing the receiver to my ear.
Hello, sir. I'm sorry to bother you at this hour, but this is Dr. Ward. You met me earlier today when you wanted to speak to a patient of mine.
The voice on the other end of the line spoke. Yeah? I said, confused as to why the doctor would be calling me, especially in the middle of the night.
After you left, he went mad, and we haven't been able to sedate him. He threw his dinner on the floor and went and barricaded himself in his room. We've been able to talk to him, and he seems to be of solid mind at the moment. But he keeps demanding to speak to you.
Dr. Ward informed me. Me? Why does he want to speak to me? I asked, now even more confused than ever.
He says you're the only one that understands him. I'm sorry to bother you like this. He was doing so well. He hadn't had an outburst like this in months, and he was getting along just fine with the other patients. But, sir, may I ask you to please come down here and speak with him? You don't have to go in there with him or anything. We're just asking you to come help talk him into coming out of his room. For some reason, he feels a connection to you, and you make him feel safe. So, if it wouldn't be too much of a bother, would you please come down to the hospital and see what you can do?
Dr. Ward asked. I started, not knowing how to answer, but being the Good Samaritan that I was, I agreed to come help them with the situation. I rolled out of bed and gathered together my clothes so that I could be decent to assist in helping them and not be arrested for indecent exposure in the process. Stumbling through the darkness of my little room, with only a dim streetlight from the outside illuminating my way, I made it to the door and stepped out into the hallway. But my foot didn't make contact with solid ground. Instead, I let out a scream as I fell down into an endless darkness. I kicked my legs and flung my arms in every direction, praying to make contact with some form of surface so that I could possibly climb my way out of this abyss. But there was nothing. Endless darkness in every direction, with only the fading light shining in from my bedroom door above me, a light that quickly turned into a pinpoint, and then into nothingness. Only pure black. I could see small lights from below me in the pit, like fluorescent spheres that appeared to shift their colors like gasoline in a puddle. The colors quickly grew in size, and I was soon able to see their true shape. They were indeed spheres, like multicolored bubbles, all floating upward in the shaft of the pit. These bubbles were of all shapes and sizes, and they gave me an odd feeling of tranquility. They made me feel like everything was going to be all right. Like I wasn't going to hit the bottom of this pit and splat like an insect on a car windshield. I watched as these bubbles began to pass me by, and as I fell quickly past them, I was able to catch glimpses of images within them. There were images of beautiful places and beautiful things. Waterfalls, flower-filled meadows, unicorns, and puppies. There were feelings of love and joy and happiness that seemed to emanate from the bubbles filled with dreams. But for every dream, there is a nightmare, and my feelings of peace and well-being were soon replaced by those of fear and anger. The feelings were followed by the things that caused them, the nightmares flooding upward from the pit, the swirling masses of amorphous darkness, a mixing of black and purple. I watched as these things morphed and transformed, shooting upward beside me. There were things with arms tipped with clawed hands, odd appendages with large bloodshot eyes, others with mouths with rows of jagged teeth within them, and several tentacles, both short and long, stuck out from every angle of the creatures. These appendages were used to latch on to the bubbles of dreams, so that the demonic creatures could siphon the joy, the very life from the rainbow-colored bubbles, twisting and transforming them into a darkened shell of their former selves. A darker shell that soon sprouted disgusting appendages of its own, spreading like a virus and becoming a nightmare itself. The things appeared to pay me no mind as I fell. Their only interest for the moment was spreading their darkness. I was distracted by the various creatures floating upwards when I felt a hard thud, followed by the cold feeling of tile floor against my skin. For a moment, I thought for sure that I was dead. There was no way that anyone could survive a fall that far. Yet, here I was, laying completely unhurt upon a cold, white tile floor. My first instinct was to roll over and look upward at the great pit from where I had fallen, but I didn't see a large black hole like I expected. Instead, I saw the plain, white ceiling tiles and large lights of a hospital hallway. Sure enough, upon climbing to my feet, I saw that I was indeed in the hospital. There, down the hallway, as I suspected, was a somewhat large gathering of people in front of a closed door, all of them trying desperately to get in.
"You're finally here. What took you so long?"
Dr. Ward yelled to me, motioning for me to come over.
"The journalist you talked to earlier is here now. Will you please come out and talk to him?"
Dr. Ward then said, turning toward the door. I was terrified, and I was completely confused as to how I had gotten here, and what had just happened. What did I just see? How am I here? I thought, as I mindlessly approached the commotion ahead of me.
"Come on now."
Dr. Ward beckoned for me. I approached the door and the group of people. Hey, I heard that you were asking for me," I said. Is it really you?" Familiar voice said from behind the door. "Yes, it's me. I was here earlier so that you could tell me your story," I informed him. "Are they still out there?" asked the man on the other side. "The doctors and nurses?" "Yes, sir, but they're just here to help," I answered him. "No!" the man yelled loudly. "Not them! The things! The nightmares! The monsters! Are they out there?" He frantically yelled through the door. "No, sir. Just the doctors, nurses, and myself. I came all the way down here in the middle of the night just so I could talk to you again. Just so I could hear more of your story. So, if you'd like to come and tell me about it, why don't you come out and we can sit and have a chat, okay?" I asked him nicely, trying to coerce him into opening the door, allowing the orderlies access to him so that they could sedate him and I could get home. The voice on the other side of the door said, unsure. "All right. Everyone please stand back. I'm opening the door," the man said through the metal barrier.
"Thank you,"
Dr. Ward whispered to me as we began to hear movement behind the barrier before us. The door slowly swung open to reveal the man inside, and I nearly fell onto my knees in shock. The man inside was not the man that I had interviewed. Instead, it was as if I was looking into a mirror. The room inside resembled my room at home, and the man before me was me. In shock, I turned to look at the doctors and nurses behind me, catching the number of the room on the door as I did. 103. I then continued to turn and saw a young, red-headed nurse and an orderly with a clean-cut beard and a beer gut. I recognized them as the waitress that had taken my order and the crazed man outside. "What the hell is going on?" I asked, to no one in particular, completely confused as to what was happening.
"You're here with us now, sir,"
Dr. Ward said. "What?" I asked him, nearly in a panic. Dr. Ward simply looked at me and began to laugh. His laugh then turned to a kind of high-pitched cackle, which slowly deepened into a deep and demonic laughter. I watched Dr. Ward's skin begin to peel and flake away, chipping and falling to the floor like chips of bloody paint falling from a wall. As his skin cracked and fell, I soon witnessed tentacles sprouting from the cracks in his flesh. First, small ones, followed by larger ones as his face began to split apart, revealing the hideous beast beneath. The head that protruded from the doctor's lab coat was now that of a squid-like, multi-tentacled beast that was also covered with crab-like appendages. Crab legs and claws sprouted from his neck and head, and within the folds of his skin could be seen both large and small mouths with grinding, jagged teeth. But it was the creature's eyes that filled me with dread. They were golden, almost cat-like eyes that sat on either side of his head, narrowing into an angered brow. I screamed in terror as the nurses, doctors, and orderlies rotted into corpses and spilled into pools of gore upon the floor. They were nothing but mere flesh puppets of the beast before me.
You must see where he has failed.
The beast spoke to me in 1,000 different voices, all of them speaking in unison. The creature then slammed the door shut, locking me in the room. The man was gone, logically, because he and I were one and the same, and I was now alone, trapped in my own prison.
Well, if you've enjoyed this little story, the previous installments, or maybe just want to see where it's all heading, you can now purchase this tale for yourself. The link is down in the description. So, if you're interested in looking at the book that looks back, now you can own it for yourself, or stop back when the nightmare continues. And until then, remember to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.